After the first few years of implementing Project Mawingu, sold as the key to Kenya Airways' future, the company hit turbulence in the form of shrinking profits. Titus Naikuni, for whom Project Mawingu was a flagship project, would resign 1 month before his retirement date, paving the way for Mbuvi Ngunze, who was at the time the company's chief operating officer.
For a long time, KQ depended on just public relations. They thought PR is better than facts.
Paul Wafula is a business journalist, and he has covered Kenya Airways for years.
Something happened at Kenya Airways before the transition from Titus Naikuni, who studied the ship for quite some time. And I think by the time he was leaving, there was something that had happened at Kenya Airways that only a few people knew. So the person who took over from Titus Naikuni, Mbuvi Ngunze then, I think he found such a difficult terrain, and he was basically trying to put everything together, but it was too late.
According to the Senate report, the management at Kenya Airways was partly to blame for turning it from a profit-making to a loss-making airline. The Senate recommended the sacking of the then CEO, Mbuvi Ngunze.
So the committee felt that there was need to put in fresh blood and fresh perspective, because it was viewed that could be a continuation of a scheme of succession that was going to cover up.
Mbuvi Ngunze resigned in May 2017 after 2 years at the helm of KQ. He earned a total of 104.8 million shillings. KQ's total losses for the 2 years he was CEO was 51.9 billion shillings. In the exit package, Ngunze earned a total of 23.1 million for consultancy work for the 9 months he remained as a consultant on the KQ's restructuring program. The Senate committee also called for investigation of the management together with the former CEO Titus Naikuni, who had resigned 1 month before his retirement date in 2014. Naikuni had been at the helm of Kenya Airways for 11 years.
The committee's impression was that the then former CEO had some questions to answer, including questions of accountability. And I do believe, because of the heavy burden the KQ continues to present on the taxpayers of this country and the opaque nature of some of the myriad of transactions that were entered, prefer anti-corruption charges and be able to recover part of what was lost as a result of a careless and negligent expansion plan.
And I can stand in front of you and tell you I have never been involved in corruption myself. Never. And never will I want to be. Now, if there are other avenues that perhaps people may have used to get into corruption using the airline, I may not know. But from my knowledge of the Mawingu project and how we went through it, there was no room for corruption where I knew what was happening and I allowed it to happen.
Basically, procurement is extremely irregular. Procedures are not followed. Procurement policy is not followed. The top management have become procurement managers, just procuring the way they want. In most cases, you find they single source without any justification, like the example of the PR services that was single sourced.
In the single sourcing request worth 20 million shillings, questions arose about the procurement procedure. For instance, the work was to start on the 1st of April 2019, yet the letter was written on the 15th of April 2019 and approved on the 25th of April. In the request, services required read in part to engage a special firm to immediately work on turning the continued negative publicity to improve KQ's image and reputation among key stakeholders, which simply means public relations services. But the letter goes on to explain the reasons for single sourcing as, quote, currently only one provider in the market provides this specialized services, end quote.
I know there are many things that happened in the past that could have maybe been done differently, but I don't want to spend time looking back, because then if you look back, you're not going to spend enough time looking forward. So I want to spend a lot more time seeing how we can change things for the better of this company and for the benefit of the economy of this country.
Alan Kilavuka was appointed as a Group Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer of Kenya Airways, a shot in the arm for the struggling airline. He held a post in acting capacity from the 1st of January 2020 up to April the 1st when he was confirmed. He was previously the Chief Executive Officer and Managing Director of Jambojet Limited, a fully owned subsidiary of Kenya Airways.
We have a system, we have the people. Of course, like any other airline or like any other business in Kenya, there are people who are looking for loopholes to find ways in which they can do things in the wrong way. But our policy is very clear. My policy is very clear that, I will not entertain those kinds of things. We don't entertain those kinds of things, and I think everybody here understands what our values are in terms of integrity.
According to Kenya Airways' annual reports, the company made its first profits in 1996 and maintained that trend up until 2009, when they made a 4 billion shilling loss. In 2010, they bounced back with an after-tax profit of 2 billion shillings. In 2011, they made a 3 billion shilling profit. In 2012, their profit reduced to 1.6 billion shillings. 2013 was a turning point in the company's fortunes as they made a significant drop from profit-making to loss-making, a trend that the company is yet to recover from. In 2016, Kenya Airways broke its own record for Kenya's worst ever corporate results by reporting a 26.2 billion shilling net loss, up from 25.7 billion shillings posted in 2015. In 2018, they posted a 7.5 billion shilling loss. In 2019, their losses increased to 12.9 billion, and in 2020, they posted half-year losses of 14.3 billion shillings, citing COVID-19 as the major cause for that 67% increase in losses.
And if you recall, we were a very profitable airline up to a point in time. Now, at that point in time, the airline made decisions which were very critical in terms of expansion. And those decisions were, in my opinion, the correct decisions to make. But unfortunately, there were other external things or factors that came in to affect the plan, the growth strategy. For example, we had the terrorist attack, particularly Westgate, and then of course Garissa, if you remember, and then the Al-Shabaab activities that followed the travel advisories. Then we had the Ebola situation in West Africa. All those things put together, including a situation with the fuel prices, did not help with the expansion program.
Michael Joseph was appointed Kenya Airways board chair in 2016, and in his written responses to Africa Uncensored, he says, and quote, "There are many reasons, not all of them obvious, for the poor financial performance up to that date by KQ. I think it's important to put that in perspective, as it's too easy just to blame poor management. Some of these were a delay in the delivery of the new 787 aircraft due to Boeing manufacturing problems, the advent of unfettered agreements to allow the Middle Eastern low-cost carriers, Emirates, Qatar, Ethiopian, etc., to land at JKIA and take passengers from KQ with very little restrictions on the number of flights and without reciprocity. Ebola in West Africa, resulting in the government of Kenya forcing KQ to suspend flights to West Africa, resulting in loss of revenue to KQ. Finally, the Westgate terrorism attack, which together with Ebola meant a serious reduction in visitors coming to Kenya. However, even as the CEO and board chair try to absolve the management, Africa Uncensored has acquired documents that give an idea of what might have been happening at the national carrier, occasioning the long streak of losses. According to a forensic audit report by auditing firm Deloitte, Kenya Airways incurred a potential total loss of 398 million shillings in the repatriation of United Arab Emirates dirhams and South African rand. This was in just 40 transactions reviewed by Deloitte. They found that some of the funds for the transactions were not credited into KQ accounts and that some Kenya Airways staff benefited directly from the transactions. For instance, Githenji Yetegi, the then Treasury Supervisor for back office and online sales, received a total of 13.5 million shillings from Dubai Bank, and his wife received 8.5 million shillings from the same bank. Although he was not authorized to carry out the repatriation transactions, he did it for months. To conceal the anomalies, the staff altered bank statements. For instance, one payment of 11.9 million shillings to Brookside Dairy was altered to 21.9 million shillings. In 2018, 2 years after the forensic audit, 2 of the staff members were charged with conspiracy to steal over 521 million shillings worth of property of Kenya Airways. They were released on a 300,000 shillings cash bail, and the case is still ongoing. Another ballooning cost for the airline over the years has been employee costs, which have doubled in a span of 10 years, yet the number of staff has reduced over the years. For instance, the total number of staff in 2007 was 4,154, and the employee cost was 6 billion shillings. In 2010, staff numbers were 4,133, and the employee costs were 10 billion shillings. In 2013, the staff numbers were 4,006 and the employee costs were 12 billion shillings. In 2015, staff were 4,002 and the employee cost had gone up to 16.9 billion shillings. In 2018, the staff numbers were 3,906, but the employee costs were 16 billion shillings. This may have been as a result of outsourcing critical labor.
There was a big outflux of engineers from Kenya Airways. Many engineers left and went to work in Middle East countries. Now, KQ is buying many aircrafts because of Project Mawingu, yet engineers are leaving. And one thing that I must say, it takes around 3-4 years to train a pilot. It takes 12 years to 15 years to get a certified engineer. An engineer straight from campus is not an engineer. He has to go through certifications.
For a long time, when pilots and cabin crew realized that they're not going to get so much from KQ, they got into an allowance frenzy. And if you look at the structures, I mean, there are people who will fly as much as they can, or if you're a cabin crew, to just make sure that you get to your hours so that you can make this money in terms of allowances.
Still through the Senate inquiry into KQ affairs, the committee established that the company had 2 tiers of crew members, one employed directly by Kenya Airways and the other outsourced from a service provider called Career Directions Limited. And even though the crew had the same responsibilities, they enjoyed 2 different terms of service.
Kenya Airways is full of new staff who are hired on contract from a company called Career Directions, CDL. All they are interested in is cheap labor, so there is a lot of cheap labor in Kenya Airways. Cheap labor who do not understand a thing about an airline, and you expect to turn around an airline with such kind of staff.
In 2012, Kenya Airways retrenched close to 600 employees as part of its cost-cutting measures. They in turn outsourced over 500 staff and cabin crew from Career Directions Limited. Under this arrangement, CDL deployed crew and charged Kenya Airways a handling fee. The questionable decisions seemed to have an even deeper impact the further one looked into some deals that KQ engaged in. In more than one instance, Kenya Airways' storied relationship with Dutch airline KLM seemed to favor KLM. According to a forensic audit done by Deloitte Consulting Limited, KQ bought 2 planes, Boeing B737-300 aircraft from KLM under a conditional sales agreement in 2010. The two planes, 5Y-KYM and 5Y-KYN, were 13 years old and were bought at a cost of $10,260,000, which is approximately 1.1 billion shillings at current market rates. However, when the company started facing financial problems, they were both sold at a cost of 210 million shillings to Engage Aviation LLC, an American commercial aircraft sales and marketing company. During a parliamentary committee hearing, it was revealed that an independent review of the potential value of the two aircraft was stated at 600 million shillings each.
KLM was selling services to KQ. KLM was there for as I said, that of course, they were doing the airline business, right? So they'd make the normal profits from the general operation. But one area that KLM was very, the Dutch are very smart, by the way. They would make money by selling KQ their products, their things, even their planes, their old planes. They push old planes to KQ. And KQ would pay a lot of money for those planes.
For me, I think this is a big brother, a big brother telling you you must have this, and if you don't have this, maybe we'll not do this for you, because you want to dispose, and you say, you guys, you have to buy this from me. I don't think it was mutual. Yeah, there's no reciprocity. I'll think that KLM was getting more than KQ was getting out of that.
When Kenya Airways was privatized in 1996, the government owned 23% of the company, and KLM, the other major stakeholder, owned 26%. This arrangement saw KLM have a heavy presence in KQ's management and board. Article 115 of the Articles of Association of Kenya Airways Limited reads, in part, quote, "If and for so long as a corporation agreement shall remain in force, any resolutions relating to any of the following matters shall be deemed not to have been passed if any KLM director or his alternate is against the proposed resolution." End quote. Thus, KLM directors had veto powers over KQ in various decisions, such as the appointment or dismissal of the managing director or finance director of KQ, the acquisition or disposal of any aircraft. KQ management was not authorized to make any major strategic decisions without prior approval of KLM directors, among others.
Running back, I told you that I went to Cranfield. And in Cranfield, I wrote a paper developing Kenya Airways in an era of liberalization. And in the paper, I suggested that there are two carriers which would be interested in buying Kenya Airways. That is British Airways and KLM. In my paper, there would be two trunk routes: Nairobi, London, and Nairobi, Amsterdam. Now, we would partner with a European carrier.
Under that joint agreement, the two airlines would operate as a joint venture, feeding into each other's hubs. This meant that Kenya Airways would fly to Amsterdam and pull out from flying to different cities in Europe. KLM would also fly to Nairobi and pull out of flying to different African countries.
Now, this was a brilliant idea because all parties were benefiting. Now, in time, the European KLM, which we went into bed with, renegated on the whole strategy. They came back into Africa, so they would actually be competing against Kenya Airways. And unfortunately, because of the power the KLM had in the board, and I would say the management, the leadership team under Titus Naikuni ignored this. And this would later give Kenya Airways a lot of issues strategically.
I think that I never understood the original intention of KLM buying a stake in Kenya Airways, but certainly I could say that the partnership was not commercially viable for Kenya Airways, right?
you could find that they both fly in the same direction, which is not the intention of any tie-up between two airlines.
As the company faced financial constraints, they started disposing and leasing out some of their assets. But some of these sales were shrouded in a cloud of mystery. For instance, in 2015, Kenya Airways sold its prime morning landing slot at London Heathrow Airport to Oman Air. Kenya Airways inherited the slot from East African Airways and enjoyed what's known as grandfather rights. According to media reports, Oman Air broke a record by buying the most expensive slot in Heathrow's history at a cost of $75 million, which translates to about 7.5 billion shillings. The figure corresponds with Oman Air's annual report, which shows that they spent 28.9 million Oman Rials, which is approximately 7.5 billion Kenya shillings, for the Heathrow slots. However, in KQ's 2016 company report, they report that they received 5.4 billion shillings. So what happened to the 2.1 billion shillings difference? In a written statement to Africa Uncensored about the sale of the slot, Kenya Airways board chair Michael Joseph said, and quote, "As the timing of the KQ pair was not particularly valuable on their own, an agreement was reached with Air France and KLM to combine the KQ slots with the two of theirs to make them more valuable." End quote. According to Michael Joseph, the proceeds for the slots would be shared equally between Kenya Airways and Air France KLM. And KLM provided new slots for KQ as part of their in-kind contribution for additional KQ shares during the 2017 financial restructuring. His statement continues. After the formal tender process, the morning slots were sold to Oman Air, in addition to an agreement to lease two 787 Dreamliners, and the evening slots were sold to Emirates. The proceeds were split between KQ, which received $53,750,000 US, and Air France and KLM, which received the same amount. However, this adds more questions about the slot sale. For instance, why pair with Air France and KLM for a prime morning slot?
So you don't make profits by selling your assets that generate income. That's a very short-term view of things. So if you sell your slot that was making your flights a bit more premium because of that, it's very short-term. You'll make that 5.6B and plug that short hole, but you lose out on the bigger scale of things.
In 2016, Kenya Airways hired McKinsey & Company, a global consultancy firm, to help them restructure and turn the company around.
So it was actually a total rip-off. McKinsey was actually a conduit used by the top management to make money, and they ripped Kenya Airways properly.
Kenya Airways terminated its contract with McKinsey in 2017. The subject of the contract is not public knowledge.
McKinsey, we don't know much about the McKinsey because it was a very guarded contract or how they were operating. Today, even if you try to get any information about McKinsey, it is hidden. But the little we know, or the little I know, they used to get 10% for whatever projected savings they'll say they have made. McKinsey are supposedly the turnaround experts. So they'll come, they'll save you, let's say 20 million Kenya shillings. They get 10% of it. Whether it was real or projected, I don't know. But they used to get 10%. So out of that 10%, it was a lot of money. I mean, the figures are mind-boggling.
I don't have a projection of how much savings they brought, but what they came to do is to help introduce operational efficiency. One of the things, actually I have not read their contract, but some of the evidence I see around me is to introduce operational efficiency, which I can see the evidence of. For example, to track action and make sure that action is done and is done on time.
And there's an allegation that the contract is highly guarded. Is that true?
No, it's not true. But I've not, I've not gone to. Okay, more. I think maybe the thing that I would say in general is I have spent less time looking at the only thing I've done for the past is to understand the pitfalls that happened and not necessarily looking at individuals,
Our sources indicate that McKinsey used to hold regular town hall meetings with Kenya Airways staff when they collected ideas and suggestions from the staff. They may have also sat in board meetings.
And then they would implement those ideas. They really never helped anything because they got ideas from the people within the company. They would get ideas from them, from people who have been working there with experience. And then they would implement those ideas, and then they would get a 10% cut. And the people who enjoy the 10% cut are many. It was a very expensive, exploitive business. They never turned around anything. They never brought anything because all those ideas are well within the company. The people who are there, the real employees, they're the ones who actually don't get any credits for the job.
But in its past too lay disquieting signs that all had not been well for far longer. In May of 2007, one devastating event would expose to some hollowness at the heart of the airline's corporate culture that no balance sheet could hide.